episode of Body System Safari Searches, we will be exploring the nervous system, something that's rarely seen and scarcely understood. But today, we will shed some light on the mystery of its anatomy and functions. Today, we've spotted a prime example of a nervous system. Now, what makes it so special is its unique ability to process, store, and transmit information between external and internal environments. It basically takes information from the outside environment, or the internal organs, sends it to the brain where the brain processes and integrates the information, then coordinates a response that's sent back to the rest of the body. Now, let's take a closer look. It's found throughout the land of the body, living from the safety of the skull all the way to the furthest limbs. The nervous system has two general parts, the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. If we look super closely, we'd see that the nervous system is composed of neurons, a kind of cell that's distinctive to this particular species, and which can sense, receive, and communicate signals to other nearby neurons. And a nerve is a bundle of these neurons. For now, let's focus on what we can see with the naked eye. The central nervous system is composed of the brain and the spinal cord. This is where it's able to integrate information received from the peripheral nervous system to coordinate bodily responses. These actions can be voluntary or involuntary, with the latter rarely being witnessed. For example, if the subject were to touch a hot surface, they would have the conscious reaction of moving away from the surface. Meanwhile, an involuntary response could be the unconscious increase in heart rate due to an anxiety-inducing situation. Now, the brain here is able to perceive and process all of these sensory information and stimuli, and then send signals to the rest of the body telling it how to respond. It is made of many different regions which control different functions. The brain coordinates actions like moving, breathing, sensing, thinking, and more. It can perform basic functions like motor, sensory, and automatic functions, and higher functions like cognition, emotions, and consciousness. Meanwhile, the spinal cord here acts as a pathway for this information between the brain and the peripheral nervous system. Isn't that beautiful? Now, let's take a closer look at the peripheral nervous system. This here is made of neurons that connect the central nervous system to tissues and sensors in the body. One of its biggest jobs is to communicate messages from the central nervous system to the rest of the body. The peripheral nervous system also has two divisions to it, the somatic nervous system and the autonomic nervous system. The somatic system has to do with voluntary movement and works with sensory signals sent from the nerves to the central nervous system and motor signals from the central nervous system to the skeletal muscles. Meanwhile, the autonomic system deals with involuntary movement and regulates the body's physiological functions, running signals between the central nervous system and the body's organs. Basically, the somatic system carries out actions that you are conscious of, while the autonomic is unconscious. And within the autonomic, there's another two divisions. Isn't that neat? There's the sympathetic nervous system and parasympathetic nervous system, and these actually oppose each other. The sympathetic division increases energy, like increasing heart rate and blood pressure, while the parasympathetic conserves energy, like slowing the heart and stimulating digestion. An easy way to remember this is that sympathetic is fight or flight and parasympathetic is rest and digest. The nervous system also has one more part, another one, I know, called the enteric system, which exists in the gut and, fun fact, contains as many neurons as the spinal cord. Now, this system controls many unconscious processes in the gastrointestinal tract. Well, thank you for joining me on this journey today. Nature really is amazing, isn't it? Now, make sure to stay tuned for our episode next week on the 10 coolest bodily functions caught on camera. Now, here's a message from this episode's sponsor.
Whoa, didn't see you there. Hi, it's Jackson with The Brain. Straight off the line, this newest product from the body, and I guarantee it'll blow your mind. The brain is the most complicated organ yet, and has 3 critical regions that'll make your nervous system run like new. Now, let's talk cerebellum. This baby coordinates muscle movements, balance, and posture. Now that's beautiful. The cerebrum is great too, interpreting and controlling touch, vision, hearing, and fine motor skills. The real prize here, though, is the brainstem, which relays signals to the cerebrum and cerebellum, regulates many involuntary functions, like breathing, heart rate, body temperature, and digestion. And it's all made by evolution. You know evolution always makes good stuff. Now, let's look closer. These regions are made up of neurons, the basic unit of the nervous system, and let me tell you, these are top of the line. These puppies come in all shapes and sizes and perform all sorts of functions and are found everywhere in the nervous system. But all of them can sense and communicate internal and external signals. This thing's got 4 main regions: the cell body, which contains the nucleus and other organelles, the dendrites, which receive information from other neurons, the axon, which conducts generated electrical signals across the cell, and axon terminals, which sends the message to the next neuron. Now, these neurons use the electrical signals called action potentials to send messages from the dendrite to the axon terminal, where the terminal of one meets the dendrites of another in a place called the synapse. These babies are responsible for conducting messages between neurons and can do it electrically or chemically. When an action potential arrives at an axon terminal, the synapse causes it to release a chemical messenger called neurotransmitters, which diffuse across the synaptic space, usually only 25 nanometers wide, and onto the dendrite on the other side. That ain't all though, folks. Order now, and your neurons become free with glia. The glia are these silent partners of neurons, and much less is understood about them. But we do know that they do not generate or conduct signals. There are 2 major types of glia, macroglia and microglia. Macroglia support and protect the function of neurons. For example, oligodendrocytes protect the axons of neurons in the brain with myelin, while astrocytes help form the blood-brain barrier that protects the brain from the toxic particles in the blood. Because the barrier consists of cell membranes, fat-soluble solutions can still diffuse through, such as anesthetics and alcohol, so be prepared for these substances to have a profound impact on brain activity. Meanwhile, microglia are independently moving cells that are activated by the tissue damage or the presence of foreign matter, acting as the main immune system of the nervous system. I don't know, this stuff just sells itself. Remember, folks, call now to get everything I mentioned, including the complementary glia. Call the number on the screen right now and buy your brain today. We interrupt your scheduled programming to bring you this breaking news. The newest and hottest product that has rolled off production lines, the brain, has recently been found to have a series of potential mishaps and afflictions, which could seriously damage the capabilities of the organ. The brain, which has been marketed aggressively as the revolutionary new organ, has been under increasing scrutiny from the scientific community. Shockingly, leading scientists have recently announced that 100% of individuals who own a brain die. This disturbing new evidence has led many to question if buying the product is really worth it. While scientists continue to study the long-term effects of having a brain, several potential diseases have been confirmed, including the 3 I will now present. The first disease, multiple sclerosis, occurs in 1 in 700 Americans. Though the cause of the disease is unknown, scientists know that it involves the body's immune system mistakenly damaging the protective myelin around the neurons in the brain, and can lead to impaired motor function. At this time, there is no known cure for this affliction. The second disease I will mention is the Guillain-Barré syndrome. Similar to multiple sclerosis, Guillain-Barré is an autoimmune disease in which the immune system attacks the protective myelin of healthy nerves. This disease only affects neurons in the peripheral nervous system. In severe cases, it can lead to lingering weakness, numbness, or even paralysis. Lastly, I will mention substance addiction. Coming in many forms, including stimulants and depressants, addictive substances can alter the chemical composition of the brain and can change the reactions of the central nervous system. In most cases, the substance in question will manipulate the reward pathway in the brain, which is a pathway from the ventral tegmental system to the prefrontal cortex. In the brain, addictive substances prevent neurons from disconnecting with dopamine-heavy synapses, causing an unnaturally large rush of dopamine. As a result, the urge for a similar gravity rush becomes greater and greater, until eventually the body is reliant on the drug and cannot produce healthy amounts of dopamine in any other way, such as through eating, sleeping, or exercise. Other substances also target the hippocampus and cerebellum, interfering with memory and balance, respectively. In any case, if you or someone you know owns a brain, make sure to caution them about addictive substances. They could easily overrun and take over one's natural brain activities. This concludes the public service announcement. Good night to all, and to all, a good night.